Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's a lot of us on this webinar. It's nice to be with you all here. I'm Adrienne Markworth. I'm the Executive Director of Leo's Pantry. Very happy to see so many people interested in protecting our beloved program. I've been involved in this program since 2008. It's just a terrific program and there's so much potential and it should be protected. And that's why I think we're all here. I've checked out the registration list, so many familiar names. I know a lot of you are SNAP-Ed implementers or already involved in the SNAP-Ed program. We did design this webinar specifically for groups that might not be as familiar with the program, with the hope that advocacy that is being done could be weaving in some Save SNAP-Ed messaging and strategies, especially right now for senators. We'll see if that shifts to the House. So if that describes you and you're not familiar with our program and you've never heard of us, welcome, welcome, welcome to the SNAP-Ed family. We're really happy to have your attention for a few minutes during what I know is just a very busy and stressful time for lots of reasons. I want to quickly introduce who we all are. As I said, I'm Adrienne Markworth from Leo's Pantry. We implement SNAP-Ed in California. We also provide training and capacity building for national partners, not only in the SNAP-Ed network, but some of you may be familiar with us that work in the Feeding America Food Bank network. We work in FQs, we work in affordable housing with CBOs, and we also develop evidence-based programs that are used in SNAP-Ed and other places. So we're very devoted to the program. We truly believe that the program is implemented by some of the most incredible community-minded professionals, in the country. I also want to introduce ASNA. ASNA is the professional association for the SNAP-Ed administrators from all 50 states and Guam. They have really kept the SNAP-Ed ship moving for many, many years and have been advocating for and educating lawmakers about this program for a long time, although probably not with the intensity that is required in this moment. And so Jen Follier, a principal consultant at Health and Nutrition First, has been working with ASNA on SNAP-Ed advocacy and will be jumping in today to help articulate what we're asking from you all. Last, we're happy to be partnering with the Food Trust, which is based in Pennsylvania, but works with partners throughout the country on programs and policies that ensure delicious and nutritious food for everyone. Heidi Gorniak, the Vice President of Programs at the Food Trust, will share how they've engaged their senators in Pennsylvania on this issue and give kind of a rundown of where we are right now in this situation. The first thing I want to do is just introduce SNAP-Ed to you if you're unfamiliar or marginally familiar with the program, and just it really supports thriving communities. It operates all over the country. It works at the individual, the organizational, and the community level with people of all ages from all backgrounds. It's integrated into so many settings: schools, housing, senior congregate meal programs, community gardens, and the staff that works on this program are based in the communities, where they work. So a little bit more detail here. We really believe that SNAP-Ed is vital to our country's nutrition security policy. It's been around for 30 years. It's been a part of the SNAP program since that time. It's a really rare combination of, federal guidance, which sets program parameters and what we need to do in terms of reporting and evaluation, how we choose our interventions, but it's so responsive to state and local needs. Jurisdictions use those needs assessments to choose a basket of evidence-based interventions, and then create environments where healthy eating is affordable, accessible, and encouraged. This is a program that trusts the wisdom of the states, the wisdom of communities, and then provides resources and technical assistance at the federal level to ensure outcomes-based work. There's no other program like this. It is not duplicated in any other way. And again, it reaches all 50 states and Guam, and the consistent funding that we've enjoyed for 30 years has allowed for multi-year planning and stability, which creates enormous opportunities for long-term community partnerships. It's also part of SNAP policy. So for 30 years, it's been an essential bipartisan program supporting low-income Americans eligible for SNAP. Recently, like in the past few weeks, we've seen the USDA approve soda bans, but only if they mention SNAP-Ed. So every approved waiver, all 6 that are approved right now, mention SNAP-Ed as part of the communication process or the evaluation process. And because it's a policy, not just funding, SNAP is really critical in the way that nutrition security policy at federal, state, and local levels works together. So communities blend and braid their funding for really maximum impact. The SNAP-Ed budget itself is really mostly staffing costs. And many staff leverage SNAP-Ed funding and combine it with other funding from different sources. So the challenge here for us is just the recognition that this policy change will not only impact staff that's fully funded by SNAP-Ed, but will also cause a lot of collateral damage to staff and organizations which have integrated this incredible program with other programs and sources. It's also fiscally conservative. Studies have shown that SNAP-Ed drives healthcare cost savings. One report estimates $7 to $10 per invested. So cutting a $50 million program may look like it saves Congress $5 billion over 10 years, right? That's a number we've been hearing, but it actually may cost our country 7 to 10 times more than that, than what's being counted in how they're doing the math. It also drives local food supply chains by programs that engage local farmers and retailers, farmers market managers. It has a local impact in communities. Also because it's staff, a lot of these program cuts are in community, including rural communities throughout the country. The quick timeline of this elimination makes it a very, very difficult transition to sort of wind down a 30-year program in 90 days. It's just irresponsible. The last thing I will say before handing it over to Heidi is just a recognition that the SNAP-Ed coalition is broad, and nothing really drove that home more for me than this morning when I looked at the registration list, which had quadrupled, overnight at least, and just feeling almost teary-eyed looking at the number of folks that were interested in this webinar, the variety of states they come from, the variety of work that you all are doing in community from all sorts of different organizations. So, a little emotional, right? Even I don't normally get emotional looking at registration lists for webinars, but this is unprecedented times, right? So looking at who is in the SNAP-Ed coalition, land-grant universities are really the core of this program in the states, right? They have just made such a commitment to bringing evidence-based programs staffed by local community. And so they're a really big part of this coalition. Charitable food, food banks and food pantries are big SNAP-Ed implementers and benefit from the SNAP-Ed programs that might be offered to their clients in their settings. Public health agencies at the state and county level, including offices on aging, really serving our older adults, veterans, adults with disabilities. So many different CBOs either receive SNAP-Ed programming as a result of the work of educators or are subcontractors, doing the work themselves in community. K through 12 school districts, a lot of this programming happens in schools. There's been an increasing number of collaborations with healthcare, federally qualified health centers, for example, great partnership in some of these food as medicine spaces that are really emerging. In fact, that was something that was called out specifically in the 2026 House Appropriations Report, which of course fully funded SNAP-Ed and had a lot of sort of interesting comments on how SNAP-Ed could be leveraged to support the Medicaid population. And then last, I do want to call out food policy councils who are also an integral support of community-based food systems work and often partner very closely with SNAP-Ed interventions. So I want to hand this now over to Heidi, who is going to kind of talk about where we are. And Heidi, I'll just forward the slides, I think. Is that what you want me to do?
That would be great. Thank you, Adrienne. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heidi Gorniak. I'm the Vice President of Programs at the Food Trust, and really just thrilled to see how many people have joined today, as Adrienne said, to support such an important program to all of us. So there is an urgent threat right now. That is requiring immediate action. We are running out of time very quickly. As I think many of you know, the House bill that came out in May did completely eliminate the SNAP-Ed program. The Senate bill similarly is to the same end, trying to eliminate SNAP-Ed. It did leave the name of the program in the bill, but has removed all funding. We are currently, that SNAP-Ed is the only nutrition education program that has been targeted. And again, with full elimination of all funding. I think Adrian said it really well. What we'd like to have is a sensible wind down period. Obviously, the best case scenario would be to keep funding for the program. But if that's not possible, there at least needs to be more time to be able to responsibly transition a 30-year well-established program. Next slide, please. This is the expected timeline. So right now, Senate offices are reviewing the Senate Ag version of the bill and negotiating behind the scenes. They're collecting a lot of input. We know the offices are flooded right now with calls and meetings and letters, which is great. It's making it difficult, I think, for some of us to even get meetings or get our messages through, but happy to see that so many people are reaching out. Right now as well, the Senate Finance Committee has been meeting, which triggers the bird bath process to determine if the bill provisions violate the bird rule. Basically how this applies to SNAP-Ed, in a reconciliation bill process, they really can't amend or change law. They can't change the program itself. And so the Senate version, which leaves the program intact, but only removes the funding. I think part of that is to make sure that it's not violating the bird rule. So we don't anticipate SNAP-Ed changes triggering, a bird rule violation. In the next few days after today, beginning June 19th, congressional recesses start for Juneteenth. This is a time to continue outreach with both the Senate and the House when they're back in their districts. And then beginning early next week through early July, the Senate will be reconvening and aiming to finalize their spending bill. There will likely be a vote-a-rama, which is a flurry of amendments and quick decisions being made. And Senate leadership still does expect to have the vote completed and the bill to the president's desk by July 4th. If negotiations are not complete by then or they can't come to a consensus, this could delay the process into July or beyond. Next slide, please. So our strategic ask at this point has changed slightly. We have, for over the last couple of months, been really pushing home the message, Save SNAP-Ed, which is, of course, what we would all like to see happen. Given where we're at this moment, we're asking for a delay in implementation. We would like to see a 2-year delay, meaning that the ending of SNAP-Ed would align with some of the changes that are proposed for SNAP, which is looking at FY28. Really what we need is some Republican support, a Republican senator who can help advocate for this change to be made. And that could either be done through an official amendment or it could be done through a nudge, meaning they could share some language with their colleagues about tweaks to the bill that could help to make that clear, that delay in implementation clear. We are actively reaching out to Republican senators to ask for this very small change. Next slide. I just wanted to give a quick example of what we're doing in Pennsylvania around this. This kind of ties in actually really nicely to the slide that Adrian shared earlier about SNAP-Ed's coalition. So the way that SNAP-Ed works is through partnerships, and we have partnerships all over the state. And so what we're doing in Pennsylvania is we're activating. We have a core coalition of people who have been very active around advocacy efforts over the last couple of months. And now we are activating our broader coalition across the state to ask them for their support. So we have our senators in Pennsylvania, our Senator Fetterman, who is a Democrat, and Senator McCormick, who is a Republican. So we're, as much as possible, getting messages to Senator McCormick's office and reaching out to all of these different stakeholders. And you can see lots of examples here to ask them to share similar messaging. So it's kind of coming from all directions. So we're reaching out to some of our university partners, our partners in agriculture, retail, WIC, emergency food organizations, healthcare institutions, food policy councils at both the state and local levels, and then a number of state departments, including Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, Education, and Health. We do know at this point it's going to take all of us, right? One voice is not enough. But a coalition can be. So we're really committed to working as hard as we can over the next couple of weeks to raise all of these voices. Next slide. All right, and then I'm going to pass it over. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heidi. Thanks, Adrienne. All right, I guess it's my turn. We're gonna talk about call to action. I think it's pretty inspiring. I'll just echo that there's over 200 folks on this call today, and Adrienne and Heidi's work and their team is also extremely inspiring. I'm really grateful for them and their support in this effort. So my name is Jennifer Folliard. I am a policy consultant for the Association of SNAP Nutrition Education Administrators, so ASNA. And today we're going to just talk about what are our calls to action. I think Heidi laid out sort of where we are currently, and that is changing by the minute. And so we do need to be flexible and agile as we continue to advocate. But I think what we're generally trying to do is we're focusing in on the Senate. We are scheduling meetings with senators, and you can schedule meetings whether you have a Democrat or a Republican senator. These are important meetings to have. Your story and your impact in your community and in your state is worthwhile to share with them. We need to make sure that everybody understands what SNAP-Ed does in their state and the impact that it's having in their state. Make the request or make the ask. You can request, whether Democrat or Republican, that we are requesting across a variety of different stakeholders where we have the same request. And that request is to delay SNAP-Ed elimination through any feasible mechanism. And so again, we need a Republican senator to come forward and really lead this effort, but making sure that our the Democrat senators in your state are aware of what's happening and what our request is important. We need to secure commitment, and really this piece is for our Republican senators. So knowing that we need to find a leader and a champion on the Republican side of the aisle is important here. It is vital to the longevity and the sustainability of this program. And so we are really working in those states that are represented by Republican senators to make sure that we're getting specific language to them to consider and for their staff to consider on how we do this delay. And again, report back immediately. So we do have a jot form that we can share. I believe it will be put in the chat soon, I hope. And that really is just to make sure that when you are reaching out and talking with your elected officials, that you are also sharing back with us what you're hearing. I think that is really important. When you're working nationwide, having a centralized place where we can capture some of this information is really critical. I know we've been answering calls and having text messages, and we're all on different text chains and support chains and email chains, but having one spot where we can keep all that information is really going to be vital. So and again, if you are in a state that's represented by a Republican senator, please do reach out to me. I'm happy to help in any sort of way as we move forward with a specific ask and specific language. Next slide, please. So some strategic communication or considerations. I will go ahead and do this slide and then I will hand it back if that's all right. Yeah. So we do have we're limited in our paths forward. So right now we are really focused in on those senators. As Heidi mentioned, there will be, and we're expecting to have some amendments in a vote-a-rama available on the Senate floor. There might be other pathways that are viable at this moment, but our focus really is on the Senate and specifically Senate Republicans. As we move forward, thinking about what happens next, we are also preparing for that, and we're preparing a lot of different scenarios as a coalition. Thinking about, and I think Adrian mentioned what fiscal year 26 appropriations look like. In the past, SNAP Ed has been a mandatory program, meaning appropriations for the most part didn't always, it wasn't a process which SNAP Ed engaged in most of the time. We might be engaging in appropriations as we move forward. So, this is not the end. Even if we make it through the Senate, we still have a lot of different paths and scenarios that could play out to save this critical program. Delay creates options. So, again, we really are pushing our senators to make sure that we have that 2-year delay. In that space, we have the opportunity then to really drive home the importance of this program and really make sure that we can have a debate about policy around this program at the appropriate time, in a committee hearing, and so as opposed to in a tax and spending bill. Making sure we have a unified message. Again, focus on that wind down period as reasonable and responsible. And again, I think one of our good arguments here is aligning with proposed changes that are happening with other SNAP policy administrative changes, and making sure that we also get that kind of wind down period with SNAP Ed that other SNAP changes are happening. Community impact, emphasizing the harm and abrupt elimination to vulnerable communities and the broad coalition of affected organizations. So again, that could look like FTEs, it could look like number of community partners, could look like specific partners that are disproportionately impacted by chronic disease. Just making that case in your state and really thinking about how it's going to impact your state and your community. Next slide.
Okay, you want me to take this back?
Sure.
Okay, thank you guys so much. So what are the talking points here? We really want to hammer home that SNAP Ed is non-duplicative, it's impactful, and it's cost effective. These are things that we've heard are not well understood by our lawmakers. And so we need to make sure that it's understood, it's clear. We also want to be clear that SNAP Ed is not itself a financial handout in any way to communities, but is instead a tool for community ownership, individual self-sufficiency, right? It's really about handing power over to local individuals and local communities. We also believe it's a critical piece of SNAP policy. We talked already about the soda bans. And then the last talking point, of course, is that if it does need to be eliminated, a responsible sunset period is needed to avoid harm to local communities. We did create a one-pager for this. Becca just put it in the chat, so you can click on it and you will have that at the ready for your meetings. Hopefully it's clear and compelling. The last slide I think we have, which I need to bring Jen back in for, is just, we got this question as well in the Q&A. What happens if my senator is a Democrat?
Yeah, and I think, thanks, Adrienne, for that handoff. I want to appreciate all the advocacy and outreach that has been happening across the country. And I recognize that being in a state where you're represented by a Democrat can sometimes feel you're just kind of waiting. And so what can we do about that? And how can we engage and feel like we're doing something to protect this program that we all love? One way to do that, again, we are not asking Democrats to offer amendments. If we ask Democrats to offer amendments at this moment and at this juncture, our program is effectively not going to work. Sorry, I just had the neighbor girl join us. Democrats may be able to suggest a bird rule review. And so that might be an opportunity for Democrat senators to engage. And if you need any help on what exactly that means when we say bird rule review, you can please reach out to me at any moment.
One last question for you, Jen, is just why the delay versus elimination? Just walk us through a little bit the decision that the advocates have made in this particular area at this particular time.
Yeah, I think what we're looking at now is really more about math than it is about effective programs and policies. And so the larger contextual piece to this is that Republicans are looking for, and the majority is looking for savings. And SNAP-Ed's price tag right now over 10 years is a $5 billion savings. So we have to be able and willing to say, okay, we know that we need to give up some savings in this conversation around the larger contextual math issue. And so that is sort of what we've done. The language right now that we're trying to work with is to cap the funding level at fiscal year 25 and slowly, over the course of 2 to 2.5 years, basically wind down the program. But I want to caveat that with saying this gives us time, this gives us time and buys us a little bit of time, because right now there's just not a lot of air and light in the space to actually talk about the merits of the program. So and just how effective the program is. So I hope that answers that question.
I think it does. I will share with you that it's almost like a girl math argument. Those of you that are familiar with girl math, right? Don't talk about what you're spending, talk about what you're saving, right? Like you could have spent 5 billion, but now you're only spending 1.4 billion. Yay, think about how much money you save. So I think that is sort of the trendiest, coolest way that my teenagers would understand, this argument. Obviously, I'm getting a little punchy. I do see Jody had a question around, has anyone reached out to Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. and HHS about how SNAP-Ed program could be an army to help him with his initiatives they're wanting to see implemented?
Yep, I can jump in there. I think we did, ASNA is sending a letter to Secretary Rollins, and we may end up sending also a similar letter over to Secretary Kennedy just to share the importance of SNAP-Ed in the overarching policy priorities of MAHA and within USDA, the combined policy priorities to make America healthy. So.
All right, RE SNAP-Ed funding, how does the 26 budget relate to the big beautiful bill and the rescission bill? I think it's an order of operations issue. From what I understand is that the first thing, if the rescission and the reconciliation are signed, they essentially become law. If they get to the president's desk, appropriations then would lie on top of those things. So I think the order is complicated. Everything's happening at the same time. And we understand this in the SNAP-Ed program, right? We're submitting budget amendments for our current budgets as we're submitting our annual plan documents for FFY 26. It's like the federal government is in the same, kind of a boat, there as they're amending their current budget and planning for their future budget, which is why you see some contradiction, I guess, in the 26 budgets that would be retroactively impacted, right, by what's happening now. Okay, if the Senate votes to pass the bill, does it still have to go through the House? It has to go through conference.
Yeah,
So-
yep, it probably will in some way have to go back, either to House leadership or depending on the differences between the bill, they will have to conference and there will be probably an opportunity again for the House for us to weigh in on with the House. So that is something to consider as you're thinking about outreach.
The delay being asked for would mean SNAP-Ed wouldn't be cut till 2030 because the big beautiful bill is for 28. I think what we're hoping for is that we would have allocation through FFY 27 and the change would go into effect at the same time the SNAP policy changes go into effect in 28, which, I mean, this gets weedy, but, could still maybe have carry-in in 28 from 27 funds just to spending, again, that's inside SNAP-Ed baseball kind of language, right? For those of you not in the SNAP-Ed program, that it's a big topic right now for us, right? Is will carry-in even be allowed for 26, right? Is it safe to assume that Secretary Rollins already knows about the program being cut? I mean, yes, I would assume she knows it's being cut, but I would also assume she knows it was fully funded in the White House budget and she's aware maybe it's part of the soda bans. I don't know that we know what's in her mind.
Yeah, we haven't been able to discern sort of an overall strategy related to SNAP-Ed as programmatic. I think we're getting bits and pieces of it. It seems like USDA is very supportive of SNAP-Ed based on the president's budget request. And again, that's a budget request. Congress is the one that makes the decisions on spending. So, we're trying to better understand, is there an overall strategy with the program, across agency and to, both Senate and House.
This is a question from an advocate for folks with disabilities. So what language or statistics could advocates with disabilities use when talking about the impact and importance of SNAP-Ed? So I can speak a little bit about this. I know that Special Olympics has a very big nutrition initiative right now in partnership with SNAP-Ed. I have the privilege of sitting on one of the work groups for this initiative. I also am an implementer for our AAA in San Francisco, which is the Department of Aging and Adults with Disabilities, right? So I know that the program is increasingly focused on becoming responsive to individuals with disabilities. And it's really critical work that would not get picked up anywhere else. The extent to which I think we can provide actual statistics about how many individuals with disabilities are served by the SNAP-Ed program, that is not currently captured in the national reporting system. So it's hard to know exactly, especially because identifying individuals with disabilities it's a broad group. I mean, there's estimates pretty high, right? Up to like 20% of the adult population in some cases, right, might identify in some way. So I can definitely say the program is responsive to that population. I don't think, unless anybody else on this call has a better idea about how to estimate the impact, is a little bit harder because of our reporting system. Yeah, can you say more about the soda ban policy language? What does it say? So it depends on the state. I do have a tracker that lists all of this. I don't know if Becca can put it in the chat. It's just a public Google Doc link. What I'm doing is just tracking every waiver I can find that's been submitted. And then once they're approved, they're put up on the FNS website. There's a link at the top of the tracker. It kind of depends. Sometimes it's just like maybe SNAP-Ed could help us with evaluation. And sometimes it's more, we expect SNAP-Ed to help communicate the policy changes in communities where there is going to be, obviously an elimination of the ability to buy soda using SNAP or candy, depending on the waiver, depending on the state. So they do see SNAP as a lever in a variety of ways to make this policy change happen, which to me tells me that, at least from the USDA's perspective, SNAP-Ed is not just a budget item, but it is a policy nutrition security policy. I have the program that I convene of individuals who all utilize SNAP benefits, and I want to share this with them. Is there any language that's readily available that I can send to them? I mean, hopefully the talking points that Becca shared. I do want to go to the next slide, which is resources. So I think this is where we are now. These are 3 websites. One of them, Save SNAP-Ed. Actually, Save SNAP-Ed links to the ASNA website and links to Voices of SNAP-Ed. So everything is kind of linked in this one place. If you go to that website, you will have advocacy toolkit, an education toolkit, which is kind of like advocacy toolkit light, you know, like the non-caffeinated version of the advocacy toolkit, which it might be friendlier to people that are in environments where they feel nervous about that advocacy education line. It's obviously basically the same information, but again, just a little bit toned down. There are a lot of testimonials. There's a way to share your testimonial, and then senator talking points, etc. And that will continue to be updated over, you know, on really a daily basis, depending on what needs to be responsive. I will say you need to refresh the website, because what happens to me is I'm always looking at the old website, and then I complain to my staff, and then they tell me every day, like, would you just listen to us and refresh it? And then I do, and then they're right. So don't be like me. Yeah, Nancy's saying, like, you know, that focusing strictly on the education aspect is not playing to our strength. Yeah, and I think that that has been compelling. I know, Heidi, do you want to speak a little bit just to that and how it was an interesting talking point for the senator in your state?
Yeah, we've been using that as a talking point in all of our meetings, is how the policy system environmental piece of SNAP-Ed is what makes it unique. So we give very clear examples of how, you know, we're working on change in corner stores, right? And we're pairing that with signage, and we're pairing that with nutrition education, right? And that's really creating that sustainable change. And that has really, I think, made a big difference in the meetings. That's kind of when we see some of the lighting up. So absolutely, yeah, I think that's really important to highlight.
Thank you, Heidi. So one question we got is, can a list of attendees be shared so that folks know who they can band together with in their states to coordinate efforts and messaging? I would say probably not. I'm sure we'd get in some trouble for that. Let us think through in the follow-up email about maybe just having a quick button you could push, which is like, you know, permission to share my information with others, you know, in my state, and then we can do that work. But I think probably not the right idea for us to share the webinar registration list, even though, you know, many of us would probably be happy to do that. But I think we have to go the reverse, instead of assuming consent, asking for consent in that area. But I love that idea, kind of creating, you know, some community at the state level would be great. Has the social media tools and messaging been updated to reflect the new focus on delaying rather than stopping? I would say no, partially because we're expecting this to really be during conversations at senator offices versus like the mass emails and social marketing, which initially was really just about raising the understanding of this issue and raising the appreciation of what SNAP-Ed does in our country. I think now really the strategy is more one-on-one meetings with senators and less about social media. So probably not. I don't know if Jen, is that accurate from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Okay. And then maybe any role for governors.
Yes, and I think that's more of a nudge. I like how either Heidi or Adrian said that. You know, I think what, you know, ASNA speaks to the implementing agencies, and we have been requesting that our members and the state agencies raise SNAP-Ed within their state governments, and we've been working with sort of hand in hand with a few Republican state agencies to carefully do that with their governors. So I don't think it's a mass governor approach. I think it's more one-on-one.
For that. How should education policy advocates talk about how SNAP-Ed supports schools? I think I can speak, I guess, to that quickly. There is not a lot of nutrition education that is embedded in schools, right? And SNAP-Ed is very supportive of nutrition education happening in classrooms, in out of school time programs. So think Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, those kinds of things. Also in school gardens, there's tremendous work on SNAP-Ed in school gardens. So SNAP-Ed is bringing and filling the void that sort of home ec has left in a lot of cases. And I think that's a very critical piece of the SNAP-Ed program in many states. Partially when it was a federal match, they used teacher salaries to help with that match in a lot of cases. So you have incredibly longstanding partnerships between schools and school districts and SNAP-Ed educators and agencies. But I know that there's just a lot of interventions that have been developed very specifically for school environments at the grade level. I know we've done a ton of work in school gardens and out of school time. So I would really talk about that partnership. Yeah, I mean, it will be interesting, you know, we're going to end in a minute, but I'm looking at the chat. It'll be interesting to see if SNAP-Ed is eliminated, of course, where the holes are filled and how they are. The need doesn't go away, right? Like the need is exactly the same. So it's a lot of part of my brain, right, is thinking about that. Part of my brain is thinking about this. Part of my brain is one step in front of the other. But there's lots of interesting conversations that, you know, could happen if needed. Hopefully they don't have to, but we're here and ready for it all. So I want to just give a super big thanks to my partners on this webinar, Food Trust and ASNA. Super big thanks to the land-grant universities who have really stepped up during this time as well. All of you for being here and doing the good work every day in community. And, you know, just know that like we are all feeling all the feels during this time, but also feeling grateful for all the work we've been able to do. And nothing like makes us tear up than to read all the testimonials that have come through about the impact. So thank you all so much. Have a good rest of your day. info@leaspantry.org. If you have any questions, we can get them to anybody else that was on that webinar. Please visit your senators and hang in there.